In a world where most people can't stay consistent for more than a week, where families argue over the same problems, where students crumble under pressure, where workplaces drown in excuses, and where business deals fall apart because no one follows through, this video cuts deeper than comfort. Today, we're bringing Machiavelli into the modern era, not as a historical figure, but as a strategist living right now, dealing with the same chaos you and I face every day. Parenting breakdowns, family tension, school struggles, workplace politics, business negotiation failures, he would confront all of it with ruthless clarity and a level of consistency most people today are terrified to practice. If you've ever felt like your life is unstable or your goals slip through your fingers because inconsistency keeps dragging you back, then stay until the end. What you're about to hear is a brutally honest blueprint for building unshakable discipline in the world as it is now. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, because the wisdom we're about to dive into is something people around you desperately need, even if they don't realize it yet. When your 7-year-old throws a meltdown because you said no to another tablet session and the rest of the family reels from the noise, Machiavelli would not soothe with platitudes, he would rehearse authority. He'd impose a predictable routine, device curfew, visible chart of tasks, immediate consequence for breaking rules, and a small, measurable reward for compliance. He wouldn't plead or bargain. He'd structure the environment so the child has no profitable path back to tantrums. In practice, that looks like a locked cabinet for devices for a set period, a clear quiet hour where chores or reading are non-negotiable, and a family council afterward where the child participates in fixing the plan. The point is not cruelty but eliminating ambiguity. If the child knows the system responds the same way every time, the tantrum loses its power, and the parent's authority grows because consistency becomes the rule, not the mercy. If siblings fight over chores and money, Machiavelli would treat the household like a microstate where rules must be enforced with impartiality. He would separate responsibilities with written agreements, enforce immediate small penalties for failure, and create public, repeatable rewards for sticking to the agreement. He would not tolerate favoritism. He would publicly audit chore completion and hold a weekly family meeting where debts and credits are tallied. Applied to modern family life, this might mean a shared spreadsheet where allowances and infractions are logged, a rotating schedule for chores posted on the fridge, and a clause that missed chores result in loss of privileges the same day. He'd make the consequence quick and visible so the lesson is learned when it actually matters, now, rather than turned into a vague lecture later. When a teenager starts lying about grades or skipping homework because they're chasing social status online, Machiavelli would attack the incentive structure rather than the symptom. He'd replace vague appeals to do better with immediate, tangible stakes, privileges tied to verified academic behaviors, a required weekly study block monitored by an app or by a parent who treats it like a work shift, and consequences for deception that remove the social reward the teen seeks. He would also engineer accountability allies, teachers, tutors, or an older cousin, who provide independent verification. The core strategy: make cheating or laziness less profitable than showing steady, boring competence. In a world of likes and shortcuts, he privatized the reward system to ensure long-term gains beat instant popularity. When a parent excuses poor behavior because they worked all day, Machiavelli would see that as a surrender of sovereignty. He'd insist that leadership in the home cannot be outsourced to excuses. Practically, he'd demand a simple, enforceable transition ritual: arrive home, spend 15 uninterrupted minutes with the child doing a small, defined activity, then re-enter adult tasks. This ritual prevents parents from becoming present but absent, and models that reliability is non-negotiable. Machiavelli's brutal honesty here: your job keeps you fed, but your role in your child's discipline shapes whether they become dependable adults. If you won't set the boundary, someone else will, usually poorly. When family arguments escalate around money, One partner wants to save, the other spends impulsively. Machiavelli would separate emotion from ledger. He'd require immediate financial transparency, a strict budget with zero-tolerance categories, and a short probation period where spending is curtailed and outcomes are recorded. He'd treat the household budget like a campaign fund. Misappropriation has clear sanctions. In practice, this looks like a joint account for essentials, a discretionary spending cap that requires prior approval for one partner, and a loss recovery plan if limits are broken. He would not engage in long debates. He would impose structures that change incentives and allow neither partner to hide from consequences. In a school where parents demand top grades but children resist studying, Machiavelli would redesign the child's environment to make studying the path of least resistance. He would break large academic goals into mandatory, time-boxed tasks and make academic effort observable, timed study sessions logged, small daily quizzes that yield immediate feedback, and tutoring treated like a scheduled appointment, not an optional luxury. He'd also reframe praise, reward the ritual of study rather than the occasional trophy. Practically, families would install a study corner, enforce device-free study hours, and use visible trackers so both child and parent can see incremental progress. The lesson is humiliatingly simple. You either build the machine that produces grades or you continue negotiating with outcomes. When a parent struggles with a child's laziness in chores, Machiavelli would stop moralizing and start systemizing. He'd assign clear jobs with explicit deliverables and penalties that bite immediately. Missed chores reduce screen time or social outings that week. He'd create public accountability, chores checked off in front of the household, not privately whispered promises that never bind. The modern twist is using technology, a shared family app where responsibilities are posted, completion requires photo proof, and failure triggers a predetermined consequence. No speeches, only programmed reactions, because children learn through consistent feedback, not through another lecture on values. If a family member continually undermines boundaries, inviting friends at odd hours or spending shared funds, Machiavelli would isolate the problem and remove leverage. He'd change locks, adjust access to shared accounts, and demand written agreements for guests and major expenses. He'd treat the wrongdoer like a faction leader and neutralize their influence by eliminating the benefits that sustain their behavior. In modern terms, this might mean revoking guest privileges, installing guest-only Wi-Fi limitations, or requiring pre-approval for expenses exceeding a set amount. The aim is to make disorder personally costly so that self-interest aligns with household order. In the workplace, when a colleague constantly shirks deadlines but speaks loudly about intentions, Machiavelli would expose the gap between talk and delivery by instituting clear deliverables, public timelines, and rapid, unavoidable consequences for missed milestones. He'd demand daily updates in a shared channel and immediate reassignment of tasks if reliability falters. Modern managers influenced by Machiavelli would treat failure like a tangible resource, reassigning responsibilities, recalibrating bonuses, and elevating those who perform. The philosophy, prestige without product is worthless, and the office must be reorganized so that slackers either change or lose access to the power they crave. When remote work turns into a festival of multitasking and feigned availability, Machiavelli would reassert command through measurable outputs. He'd abolish vague online hours and demand deliverables with timestamped submissions. He'd implement short, focused sprints with product demos instead of long status calls, and use peer reviews to enforce standards. If someone abuses the flexibility, the punishment is swift, reassignment to low-impact tasks, removal from key projects, and transparent documentation of underperformance. In a world that confuses busyness with productivity, he'd make reliability visible and undeniable. If a boss plays favorites, undermining morale, Machiavelli would destabilize the patronage by creating impartial rules that curtail arbitrary advantage. standardized performance metrics, blind nomination processes for promotions, and a public scoreboard of achievements. He would also quietly cultivate alliances with reliable performers to shift influence away from the boss's favorites. The modern approach is policy plus politics. Formalize how rewards are earned while cultivating informal networks that reward consistent contributors. The key is to remove the boss's capacity to reward without merit and force the organization to respect consistency. When a student procrastinates because they believe inspiration will arrive, Machiavelli would break that fantasy by converting vague intentions into enforced microhabits: 15-minute mandatory study sessions at set times, immediate short quizzes to create feedback loops, and a loss mechanism where skipped sessions result in reduced leisure privileges that day. He'd refuse to valorize the romantic image of waiting for the mood and instead make discipline a visible, non-negotiable ritual. The point is not to crush joy but to outcompete the habit loop that prefers fleeting pleasures to long-term competence. When a teacher faces disruptive pupils who drain class productivity, Machiavelli would enforce a compact, explicit classroom norms. Immediate, consistent consequences for breaches, and an elegant system where good behavior is instrumentally rewarded with privileges that matter to students. He'd involve parents in a transparent reporting system so consequences extend beyond the classroom. In practice, this looks like a public behavior log, instant detention applied the same day, and privileges, project choices, small leadership roles, granted to the consistently compliant. Machiavelli's aim is to make the path of disruption more costly than participation. When a startup founder gets distracted by shiny new pivots and abandons the core product, Machiavelli would treat the business like a polity with a founding constitution, a clear mission, a sprint cadence, and a veto power against diversions. He'd require that any proposed pivot be justified with immediate metrics showing current product stagnation, not feelings. He would also deploy small-scale experiments to test ideas rather than wholesale switches, and tie leadership compensation to adherence to the plan for a fixed period. This modern application prevents serial distraction by forcing founders to justify departures with cold data and temporary sacrifices. When negotiating a business deal where the other party uses charm to mask unreliable commitments, Machiavelli would demand binding structures, conditional clauses, milestones tied to payment, escrow arrangements, and objective verification points. He'd avoid handshake deals and favor staged commitments that punish backsliding. In the modern marketplace, that means signed contracts with specific KPIs, termination clauses, and third-party verification rather than vague assurances. The brutal truth: trust is a liability without structure, and consistent enforcement is the only currency that matters. When partners in a business start blaming each other for slow growth, Machiavelli would partition responsibilities and attach immediate consequences to underperformance. If one partner fails to secure clients, their equity or decision-making power is diluted until targets are met. He'd treat partnership like a coalition where loyalty is rewarded only when accompanied by predictable output. Practically, this could involve vesting schedules tied to measurable milestones and contractual clauses that reallocate duties if obligations aren't met. The aim is to remove the comfortable fog of mutual blame and replace it with precise accountability. When a client drags negotiations with endless revisions, Machiavelli would compress the timeline by creating scarcity and deadlines. He'd set a firm cutoff for revisions, attach a surcharge for delays, and threaten to move resources elsewhere. In modern terms, this might be a final revision policy, an expiration date on proposals, and a ready alternative vendor to demonstrate willingness to walk away. He'd use scarcity as leverage. If you seem desperate for the deal, you lose. If you can walk, you win. When a parent sees their child copying peers' toxic behaviors from social media, Machiavelli would isolate the disease vector. He'd limit exposure, replace it with supervised influences, and create alternate social capital that the child craves. That might mean curated friend groups, monitored content consumption, mentorship with older teens who model desired behavior, and public recognition for sustained good choices. The goal is to shift the social reward system so that conformity to healthy routines becomes more attractive than mimicking viral chaos. When a mid-level manager faces a morale collapse due to endless meetings and unclear priorities, Machiavelli would slash the meeting load. Force clear agendas with outcomes, and hold speakers accountable to deliverables afterward. He'd replace performative gatherings with tactical check-ins and publish a simple scoreboard of progress. He'd also identify and exile time wasters. Repeat offenders who consume attention without producing must be reassigned or removed. The modern manager's job, in his view, is to protect the team's productive time ruthlessly. When a parent struggles with a child's entitlement, expecting rewards without effort, Machiavelli would withdraw automatic perks and only grant privileges after a period of demonstrated, repetitive effort. He'd make entitlement costly. Privileges are earned through visible, sustained contribution at home or school, and lost immediately upon regression. The structure transforms entitlement into earned status, teaching the child that rewards are the result of repeated competence rather than birthright. Finally, when an entrepreneur faces constant founder infighting over direction, Machiavelli would impose an interim dictator for clarity, a temporarily empowered leader with the authority to enforce decisions until the company stabilizes. He'd also codify metrics to judge that leaders' success and return power when agreed conditions are met. This harsh-sounding move prevents paralysis. In practice, it's a temporary concentration of decision-making paired with transparent exit criteria so the concentration itself is accountable. When you strip away the rhetoric, Machiavelli's modern hand is practical. He would build systems that convert good intentions into repeatable behaviors, close escape routes into old habits, and make inconsistency immediately costly while rewarding the slow accumulation of reliability. In everyday terms, parenting, family conflict, schooling, workplace dynamics, and business deals, his approach is to engineer the environment so that the rational choice aligns with disciplined behavior, and then to enforce the rules without sentimental exceptions. If you've made it this far, then you already know the truth. Consistency isn't a mystery, a talent, or a personality trait. It's a system. It's a strategy. It's the willingness to do what most people avoid because it's uncomfortable, repetitive, or inconvenient. Machiavelli would thrive in today's world for one simple reason: he'd treat daily discipline like ruling territory, enforce it, protect it, and never negotiate with the forces trying to sabotage it. Whether you're raising children who need structure, navigating family conflicts that repeat endlessly, pushing your kids to excel in school, trying to stay afloat in a toxic workplace, or fighting through the uncertainties of business deals, consistency is the weapon that cuts through chaos. If you want your life to change, you must become the person who shows up every day, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. If this video opened your eyes, strengthened your mindset, or gave you clarity you didn't have before, then make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs it. Let's build a community of people who don't just dream of progress, they enforce it, relentlessly.